This morning I want to spend our time looking at Pharaoh's altered heart. And this is one of the stranger and harder sermons that I've ever had to preach, simply because trying to understand what is the text telling us is so tough. It really is hard. So stick with me and correct me if you need to. But I want to start in kind of a weird place, and that is with fast-moving water. Fast-moving water is beautiful, isn't it? We live in an area of the country where there's a lot of it. I moved here from a place of arid sands and places where there are river beds, where there used to be rivers, but there aren't anymore. And you take it for granted when you see it so much. But we live in a place where the water dances over the stones and the brooks and off of the cliffs all over the place around here. If you haven't been out into the woods recently, it's well worth your time to go, because there's something about encountering God beside the fast-moving water, isn't there? And it's so beautiful when it looks like that. It's not quite as beautiful when it looks like this. In fact, it's a little bit terrifying, isn't it? People do this because they don't realize the great power of just a little bit of fast-moving water. A foot of water moving quickly is enough to sweep a car away. And just 18 inches will take away a semi. Did you know that? 18 inches, not even 2 feet. If the water has got to force it, because it is a strong and powerful force. That is your public service announcement for the day. It has nothing to do with what I'm going to talk. No, actually, I'm kidding. But, there's a great power in this. It is so strong, so never drive in to water, especially if you don't know how deep it is. But if it's moving fast, it can kill you, because it's stronger than you are. You know, you drive around the streets and you get to the illusion that this thing, man, it can go. I don't care if you've got a Hummer. If you move into that force that is stronger than you, you're gone. It can just take you away like that. Because the truth is, there are forces, and this is, obviously, I'm using this as a metaphor, but there are forces that are stronger than your willpower. Do you know that? And we live in the illusion, especially in post-Enlightenment. The Enlightenment puts a lot of trust in the mental faculties of mankind. That we think that our reasoning capacities and our ability, Kant particularly, Immanuel Kant, would tell you that, you know what, if you could figure it out, we figure out what you ought to do, then you just do what you ought to do. And he takes no account for this truth. That there are great powers that are stronger than our reasoning. And how many of you have figured out that something is bad for you and you did it anyway? You eat a Snickers bar ever? You go through the drive-through line? You know, there are all kinds of things that we do that we know we shouldn't do. You know, and these great forces, some of them even, some of them outside of ourselves. There's that guy, obviously, right? He is stronger than you. He's older than you. He's smarter than you. He's seen a lot of people like you. And he knows precisely how to push your buttons. Some of them are internal. Have anybody ever felt that emotion and then made a series of really good decisions? You know, have you ever been at the point where you're like, you know what, I just lost it. Lost what? Your grip on your ability to make sound choices. Why did I break every window in their car? Was that a good decision? Well, you know, from inside this barred room, I'm thinking maybe it wasn't. You know? Or have you ever faced this? The power of it. And then that first moment, it can be so strong. It's stronger in the 10th minute than it was in the first, though. And there's really only been one person who's ever survived it all the way to its end who can know just how strong this is. There's only one of us who never gave in, because it's stronger than the human will, ultimately. And it's a corrosion of your will, isn't it? Or fear, terror can make you make really dumb choices. It really can. When you're afraid, you know, and fear can masquerade as good decisions even. But you'll make horrible parenting choices, for instance, when you're afraid. Or terrible relationship decisions when it just can make such a mess of things. Or there's this one. Wait. What? A powerful force besides our will that makes strong influence on the decisions that we make. My father was an alcoholic. Are you familiar with Alcoholics Anonymous? Man, I wish he had gone. Alcoholics Anonymous is a powerful thing, although my understanding is it's only about 18% of the people who really overcome. And that even with a support group, the chances of beating that thing are really pretty low. It's a disease, but it's a weird disease because it's the only disease I know of where the primary deciding factor as to whether or not you get better is a desire to get better. And you won't get better until you want to get better. That's not true of tuberculosis or cancer. But if this, it truly is a powerful disease. If you've never seen it in action, it is so strong. The will can want to not to. You can really want not to. But that thing calls and talks. I read a story about an alcoholic who talked about how his decision to stop drinking happened about 200 times before he didn't actually count. But he would have beer in the house, and he would, in order to not drink the beer, he would have to pour. He'd say he bought an 18-pack, and he'd drink 6 of them and be ready for bed. And in the middle of the night, he would hear them talking to him until he would get up out of the bed and go have another, and another, and another. In order to not drink, he had to pour it down the drain. It's such a strong force. I have seen the corrupting power of it in my own family and my dad, like I said, and I cannot tell you as a child how many times I've heard my dad talking to my mom saying this: I promise I will never take another drink for as long as I live. And he meant it. He meant it every single time he said it. Because when he said it, he was sober. And he wasn't gonna. He was never gonna have another drink until he had another drink. It was the drinking that killed him. It was a car, but my dad was such a smart man. I'm actually very dumb next to my dad. His IQ was well beyond mine. He was such a smart man. Is that smart? Powerful force outside of himself. Where and how often are you driven by forces that are really outside of your control? Does that ever happen to you, or is my dad lonely? I don't think so either. As I began to say, we say to children, don't make that face. If the wind changes, it'll stick like that. You don't want to be stuck like that. And you know that, to my knowledge, it's only happened actually twice. It happened to this lady. The wind changed, and it's too bad, but that's her forever now. They're trying to find a cure. They haven't come up with it yet. And then there was this guy who, it wasn't so much the wind changed as the spirit did. But he got stuck like that, where he couldn't get out of it. See, there came a time where Pharaoh had to make a decision, but there was a strong force against him, and he couldn't. And so God had hardened Pharaoh's heart. And he reached a point where it became clear what choice he should make, but he couldn't make it anymore, even if he had wanted to. People around him are saying, man, this is the finger of God. He can't make the choice. He was stuck because there was a strong force pushing him in one direction. And the option to go another wasn't there anymore. Is that scary? That God would do this to somebody? When I enter into this, I told you at the beginning, this is a hard sermon because there are all kinds of things that I look at and I'm like, well, I'd really like the answer to this question. And Moses just doesn't seem fit to provide us with the answer. I don't know that God told Moses. There are questions like, is this how God always behaves? Was Pharaoh unique? This nameless king, you realize Pharaoh is not his name. That's an office. We know Moses' name. We don't know Pharaoh's name. We don't know him. But was this, whoever he is, this unique dude that God is using? And it's the only time God ever did this? Or is this the way he always does this? I don't know. Do you? If you've got a clue, let me know. Or what about this? If God were doing this to me, how would I know? I don't know how you could possibly know that. I suppose there, and when I get done with this, I think there are some clues about some of God's behavior. Because, sometimes you can kind of see it. But Pharaoh, do you think Pharaoh is aware that this is being done to him? I don't know. I would love to know the answer to that one. Or does my own will make a contribution to my destiny? Did it for him? Well, let's look at it. Because I'm going to suggest that I think that inasmuch as you have any contribution whatsoever, that's it. That's it. But let's look at it. Let's look at God with Pharaoh and how God actually acts. When God is first, even before Pharaoh is back in the picture, and when God is first appearing to Moses and he's talking to Moses, God will come to him and let him know, look, this dude that we're going to work with, it's not going to be easy. I'm not calling you into a simple assignment. That might have had something to do with why Moses was like, oh, God, send somebody else. I mean, have you ever had someone come and say, hey, this is going to be really hard. Let's go do it. And you're like, well, that's kind of what God told him. I know this Egyptian king. He will not let you go unless he's forced to. But listen to this. It says, this is in chapter 4. It says, the Lord said to Moses, when you go back to Egypt, see that you do go before Pharaoh all the miracles that I've put in your power, but I will harden his heart. I will harden his heart so that he will not let the people go. God will harden his heart? Okay, and this is important, this heart hardening process, this stripping Pharaoh of options, it was always part of the plan. That's before the plan began. This is when God is talking to Moses and he's telling him, all right, when you get there, it's not going to be easy. And when you get there, I'm going to make his heart hard so that he will resist you. So that he will resist me. Later, God will tell Moses to say, Pharaoh, it's for this very reason that I raised you up. The reason you're king is so that I can demonstrate my glory by overcoming your resistance. And yet, how is that fair if it's not really resistance? Is God pulling the strings? Is this dude just a puppet? Is God just using this guy and Pharaoh has no culpability here? Is he not responsible? Well, let's look at how God actually carries out the hardening of Pharaoh's heart. Because I think it's very instructive what Moses tells us. Okay? So in the course of delivering Israel from Egypt, God is going to pour out 10 plagues. We'll look at the meaning of those plagues next week. But there are going to be 10 plagues that God pours out on the nation of Egypt in order to deliver his people. 10. Now, I'm not going to talk through what they are, but let's look at just Pharaoh's responses to them. Okay? So here's your first plague, plague 1, and here's how Pharaoh responds. But the magicians of Egypt did the same by their secret arts. So Pharaoh's heart remained hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord had said. Okay, now who hardened his heart there? Well, it's just passive voice. Yeah, it's he did, right? In fact, it says it remained hardened. It's still hardened from earlier. Okay, but this is Pharaoh hardening his heart. Okay? Then plague 2, how does it happen here? But when Pharaoh saw that there was a respite, he hardened his heart and would not listen to them as the Lord had said. Okay? Plague 3. Then the magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and he would not listen to them as the Lord had said. Okay? Is God taking an active role here? I don't think so. I don't know. The language doesn't tell us. That's a passive voice saying his heart was hardened, but without reference to the agency, who's doing it. But I think it's still Pharaoh. I believe that's Pharaoh. Okay, plague 4. But Pharaoh hardened his heart this time also and did not let the people go. Plague 5. And Pharaoh sent, and behold, not one of the livestock of Israel was dead, but the heart of Pharaoh was hardened, and he did not let the people go. Okay, do you see what's going on here? This is a hard-hearted guy. And realize, these are all supernatural events. They may or may not have some sort of natural expression to them, but they're all supernatural events, all predicted to him before they happened and interpreted for him before they happened. Now, if I came up to you and said, I'm going to turn your car into a horse, that's what God is going to do to your car. And then your car turned into a horse, do you think maybe you'd listen to me? This guy won't. In the face of the miraculous, in the face of powers well beyond him, he's like, no. Because if I let down, who is he after all? He believes he's a God. And if he lets down just for a moment, then he has to deal with a God bigger than him. And he doesn't want any of that. So he refuses, he rejects, he hardens against reality. He will not participate in it. And that's when we get to plague 6. And here we have, he did not listen to them, but the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. You see, Pharaoh is well downstream of our starting point before he finally enters into the water and is swept away. Here, you've got God going, okay, buddy, you've had a lot of chances. I knew you wouldn't take them. I knew who you were. I know your character. But I have not touched you until now. But now you're done. And now I'm influencing your heart, and you aren't making choices anymore. I am. And so he hardens that up. And at this point, I think even if he wanted to, now the thing is, he doesn't want to. How do I know that? Well, it's all the way to plague 6 before God gets started. But notice this. In plagues 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7. In plague 7, the text says, and Pharaoh sinned again and hardened his heart once more. He still wants to do it. He still wants to. So even after God gets started in 6, in fact, God only is doing the hardening in 6, 8, and 9. After 6, 8, and 9. And of course, after 10, it's not necessary because it's such a devastating plague. There's really no going back from that. So what God does is he lets Pharaoh have plenty of time to demonstrate exactly what he actually wants. He's there in the presence of God. God is acting in his nation. This takes a year. It is a year of plagues. And this man will not. He refuses and rejects over and over again over a year's time. But there comes a point where God says, okay, even if you wanted to, you don't get to. I will harden you against, and this is the direction you want to go. I'm going to make sure you go there. I'm done giving you options now. And it's as though this is a metaphor I've used a lot of times for like decision making, but it's like there's a waterfall out there some point, and you reach a point eventually. You know, and when you're early on, you can make for the shore and you can make it. But there comes a point where the current is strong enough that you can't fight it anymore. And if you were to try to make for the shore, you wouldn't be able to make it. Well, I think that's what's happened to Pharaoh. He's going over, and God's going to see to it that he does. Now, like I asked earlier, is this how God always acts? I don't know. Does God do this to people these days? I don't know. I would love to know the answer to that. I know that Pharaoh is culpable. I really do think that he is. But he's also helped. He's pushed along. Does anyone ever suffer that? I don't think God ever does this to someone who even a little bit would be resistant to it. And Pharaoh certainly is. And it's not as though God is coming in here and going, okay, I'm going to make sure that, I know you want to, but I'm going to make sure you can't. He's not doing that. He's saying, I'm going to give you the strength and the courage to do what you want to do. As stupid as it is, I'm going to empower you. I'm going to share my power with your heart and make sure that you do this dumb, foolish, rebellious thing that you want to do. And off you go. It's all help in the direction that he wants to go. And God doesn't push Pharaoh anywhere that he doesn't already want to go. Plague 7 proves that. You know, you see Pharaoh still exercising his will, even after once it's kind of been taken away. So yeah, I think God's putting his thumb on the scale. But not against him. Together with him. But if this doesn't freak you out just a little bit, that God would do this? You know, what about somebody whose life's a mess? Does he ever harden them up so they can't get out of it? I don't know. Maybe. He certainly did with this dude. But consider for a moment, and this is actually the reason I was willing to dedicate an entire sermon to this. And the plagues are really what I want to chew on, because there's beautiful stuff in there, believe it or not. Ugly, horrible, but real profound wonder as well. But why spend an entire sermon? Well, consider for a moment the inverse of this reality. Because here, what you have is an evil man dedicated to evil, and God stepping in to empower him to be evil. Anybody here in that camp? Do you really want to do what's wrong and bad? Don't you want good? All right, well, consider the inverse. So as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to him, being strengthened with all power according to his glorious might, for all endurance, patience, and joy. Where's the power coming from? Where's the glorious might? And where does your strength come from as you seek to walk in a way that pleases God? What did you sing earlier? Draw me nearer, purer in heart, help me to be. Why did you sing that? Do you believe it? Here it is, that we are being strengthened. We are receiving a strengthening that comes not from us, but from him. Or, look at this. For I toil, this is Paul, I toil, struggling with all his energy that he works in me. This is God putting his finger on Paul's heart. You know, and you might say, hardening it, if by that you mean firming it up so he can do what he needs to do courageously and well. Strengthening and empowering, which is, it seems to me, sort of what he did to Pharaoh. He strengthened Pharaoh to do what Pharaoh wanted to do anyway, so that he could destroy him. And here he is strengthening Paul, so that Paul can do stuff to spread the gospel. Or what about this? That he may grant you to be strengthened with power through his Spirit in your inner being. You see, God is this strong force that is working on us to pull us. It's why it's so important that we come here, where we draw into God's presence and settle into God's will, so that we can sharpen our minds to be cooperative with the force that's drawing us in the direction. The force is not the force. I mean, this power, this God, who is leading us to where we need to go, instead of resisting it and being pushed where we would never want to go. That he is working on the hearts of people. And I believe this is revealed by Exodus, that God pushes us in ways that are consistent with our desires. Pharaoh was never forced against his will to do one evil thing. Pharaoh was empowered to do the evil thing that he wanted to do. And I don't know whether God does that now, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does. You ever meet somebody who's like, it's too late for me. I'd love to listen to the gospel, but it wouldn't help. Maybe they're right. I tend to think, no. I mean, I'm going to keep preaching. And because they can't see, and maybe they're wrong. And I'm always going to try and pull someone. Because I believe in the wondrous power of God. It may well be that God's going, no, not in this one. And have you ever met anybody who's like, I don't know how I did that good thing? Well, you weren't alone. And I think God pushes us in the direction that our desires go, which is why it is important to guard your heart. People think that sinful behaviors are the most destructive things that we do to each other and do to ourselves. And in a way they are. It is much worse to do a sinful thing than to have a sinful thought, in a way. But a sinful desire is somehow more pernicious than a sinful act, because you will resist a sinful act. Once you've done it, you're like, I don't want to repeat that. But the sinful desire, you want to keep. You want to want. And you hold on to it. And you don't rebuke it the same way. Because after all, it's not as bad. But God will push you in the direction that you truly desire. And if you truly desire Him, He will give you the desires of your heart. So guard your heart, because every evil thing that ever happens comes from that. And this is huge. When I look at Pharaoh, the huge mistake he makes is a heart mistake. He wants evil, and God lets him have it. Don't make that error. Guard your heart. Lead it to God. Let God give you a new heart, because He can. Seek His redemption in all things, and always be attentive to your heart, because here is the truth. We are all at God's mercy. Just like if you drive into fast-moving water, you are at its mercy. You can turn the steering wheel all you want. You can't go anywhere. And if God decides to take control, you are at His mercy. Well, we are all His creation, and we are always all at His mercy. But now here's the thing. To the one who hates God, that's a message of death. Okay? Ask Pharaoh. Because he died as a consequence of what happened. Why? Because his heart was turned against God. But here's the good news. Here's the gospel in this sermon. Waited till now. For the one who loves God, this is a message of comfort, life, and peace. Because God is good. And He wants good for you. And He wants to help you to be good. He is at work in your heart through Jesus Christ to establish a way of life and a personhood in you that you can never have on your own. He is a living presence. And those who forget it, forget with Pharaoh, who didn't believe, who is the Lord that I should serve Him? But those of us who remember are always seeking Him. We seek Him in prayer and in worship and in gathering together with Christians. We seek Him in the study of Scripture. We are seeking His face, that He might be the influential, strong power that works on us to lead us from where we are to where we can only be by His influence. And He saves. Our God is a God who rescues. And that's not just a matter of ideas. If it were, having a really strong intellect would be enough. But ask my dad whether that's strong enough to overcome the powers of evil. It's not. But God is. And in Jesus Christ, our rescue is certain and secure. It is bought for us with an eternal purchase. And we belong to God, who find ourselves in Him. And we are carried from one degree of glory to another, transformed on the inside by this strong power at work in our hearts. Maybe that you look into yourself today and you're like, you know what, I'm not much under the influence of that power. Well, you can be. You know, He is really, really good and wants to work with you. It may be that you look at yourself and you're like, you know what, nothing Ethan talked about really is what I'm dealing with, but I really need the care of the church. Well, if that's you, we want to pray for you. And if you're not a Christian, there's no better day than to begin following Jesus Christ and experiencing this power in your life than right now. If this morning you're subject to the invitation of God, why don't you come right now while we stand and sing? If you are